Greetings and welcome back to Switch to Linux. We are going to continue in our study of First Things First by Stephen Covey. We are on Chapter 2. Check out the previous video for Chapter 1, and there will be a full playlist with all of these. Also, all the outdoor philosophies are also on their own playlists, so you can check out those playlists there. So today we're talking about the urgency addiction. So the urgency addiction is this pulling desire that we have to run towards things that sometimes they're really important. Like if your house is on fire, you have an urgency, okay? Go put it out. Go do whatever you need to do to put that thing out. But there's a lot of things which strike us, especially in our modern world, because our modern world is designed to be addictive and fast-paced and all of these other problematic things. And so here we're going to be talking about the urgency addiction, which basically means that if you think of things in life, we either have things that are important or we have things that are urgent. And then of those various things, we can create a 4-point grid looking at things that are urgent and important, things that are urgent and not important, things that are important but not urgent, and things that are not important and not urgent. So what the idea here is to walk through understanding what is really important, what is not really important, and really seeking out to clarify your directions, clarify what you're doing. Because if you allow life to happen to you, you look up in 40 years and you wonder, where did it all go, and should I have been doing things a little bit better? And that's what you want to avoid. You want to avoid that type of situation. You want to get to the end of your life, look back and say, I accomplished what I set out to accomplish. And so they talk here about some urgencies, and we start with this little urgency index quiz, which I'm not going to read all of these. You can check out the book if you want to do that. They might have actually pulled this from somebody else, or I don't know, created it and published it here. I'm not sure. But basically there's a series of questions. There's 16 questions which are graded on a 0 to 4-point scale, where it's a never, sometimes, and always type approach. And then you add everything up and you determine where you are based upon your urgencies and whatnot. So, I'll read a few of these. Do you feel guilty if you take time off of work? If you're constantly feeling guilty when you take time off of work and you live for the office, I hope you don't have a family, because you're probably a workaholic. But there's obviously times you need to go and say, hey, you know what? Today is the day I need to work. I need to do that. Now, for me, I'm self-employed, and so that becomes a little bit closer to the thing, especially being self-employed and having your own home office. You really have to take that home office and separate it from some other areas of your life, and you really have to set up some specific expectations for what goes on in there versus other places. For example, I never eat in the office. I always take time out. That kind of becomes one of my mandatory breaks in the day, as I take the time out and go out and I eat elsewhere in the house, which is an important thing to do. But if you are feeling guilty when you take time off of work, that's a sign of pretty bad urgency. Also, if you do your best work when you're under pressure, that is a big sign of urgency. You live in this urgency mindset where things are whatever, but you procrastinate until things build up to the point of crisis. Once crisis occurs, you're just like, and then you go through and get something done. That is kind of that difference, what we're looking at there. And then, let's see. Rely on solving some crises to get through a sense, to give my day a sense of meaning. If you need some type of crisis to have meaning and have a fulfilled end of your day, that is kind of a problematic thing. For me, and I did this whole quiz, I end up so low. I mean, they're like 0 to 25 is a low urgency mindset, 26 to 45 is a strong urgency mindset, and 46 plus is an urgency addiction. I think I scored like a 14. I work decently well under some pressure, under some stress, but I don't have to have it to work well. In fact, I usually work well when I have enough going on that I know I'm going to be busy, but not so much that things are becoming crazy urgent. And I like getting to the end of the day and saying, okay, I did a video, I pushed out 3 project bids, I did 4 different projects, you get through the end of your day, and if it's been a day of just watching videos and doing nothing else, that's not a good day. But if it's been a day of going out and understanding that I've accomplished goals in each of the areas I've wanted to accomplish goals for, that is a good thing. And so we need to take those general things in mind. So they talk here about, and this is more of a general addiction thing rather than anything else, but the addictive experience. They have a little grid box here called the addictive experience, and says it creates a predictable, reliable sensations. So, of course, the addictive experience does produce predictable and reliable sensations. They're just not always sensations you necessarily want. Number 2 is you become the primary focus. The addiction becomes the primary focus and absorbs attention. So when that bug hits you, you just got to act on it. I forget the name of the gentleman that wrote the book, but it's called Addictive Thinking. It's a kind of a work through on addictive thinking. But he makes a statement there that an addictive thinking is like, it doesn't always hit you, but once it hits you, it is this obsession that you have to see through. Number 3, temporarily eradicates pain and other negative sensations. So that is definitely a sign of an addiction. Why do you engage in the addiction? Because it does this temporary removing pains, removing the sensations, whatever that sensation happens to be. Number 4, it provides an artificial sense of self-worth, power, control, security, intimacy, and accomplishment. Of course, that is so temporary. You get this very brief temporary period, and the rest of the time, according to the author of Addictive Thinking, it's usually the sign of a really low self-esteem that causes this type of urgency in the addiction. You feel this sense of self-control and power until you look at the life outside of you and you go, I just don't get it. And then number 5, it exasperates the problems and feelings it sought to remedy. So every time you engage in the addiction, it makes those problems worse rather than better. It gets that temporary alleviation, and then it just moves them on a little bit better. Then, of course, it worsens functioning and creates a loss of relationships. In the context of this book being more like a business type book, they're usually focusing on things like business and work and burnout. However, I will tell you from a lot of experience doing a lot of meetings in a lot of different organizations that alcoholism and workaholism are they're 2 peas in a pod. I've been at some weird parties that are just like, okay, this is just insane. But what ends up happening is you can end up doing things. Eventually, your function decreases, your quality of production decreases, and you will eventually lose a relationship. If not now, then much later in your life. And so you need to conquer those addictive experiences. So, all right. So, then what they do is they do this grid here, and I'm going to try and find a copy of this grid and overlay it over my video here if I can. But the grid here separates out 4 different quadrants. I'll go ahead and do this just in case I can't find one. But we have this. This is the urgent, important quadrant. This is the important, not urgent quadrant. This is important but not urgent, and this is not important and not urgent. So it takes an understanding of these quadrants to get what this chapter is trying to say. So briefly, important and urgent things are crises, like real crises. The house is on fire, an employee just passed out, a family member had a heart attack. In my case, I told the story last week of a friend getting lost in the woods. Those are urgent, okay? You just plop down whatever you're doing, you stop in the middle of it, you have unsaved work on your desktop, and you hope Windows 10 does not reset your computer. All right, but it's crises. Other various pressing problems and some deadline-driven projects, meetings, and preparations. So all of these things that just kind of push onto us that say, these are things that are coming up that need to be addressed. If you miss the deadline for that one project, that in a business setting, that could be the loss of a huge contract. And so you got to keep that in mind. Now, it is important to spend some of your time in that quadrant 1. The other one that is actually very important to spend time is quadrant 2. And quadrant 1 and quadrant 2 will kind of vie for time. All right, so this is the area. These are things that are important, but they're not urgent. They're not pressing on you. They're not somebody lost in the woods. They're not somebody's immediate health or life is at risk. But these do include things like preparation, because a prepared person will better be able to conquer the things in life. Prevention, which means preventing crises from coming up, because we don't necessarily want to live in a crisis mindset. It's okay every once in a while, but it wears us down. This will help you to clarify what your values are, so you know the direction you're going. And then planning is, just again, like preparation and planning goes hand in hand. Building relationships. This is very important. In kind of the roaring 80s, we had this giant trend towards this, this business focus, and everyone's so busy. And that's kind of what happens if you see somebody who is entering the workforce at that period of time. They generally live these crazy overscheduled lives, and they've been duped into the lie that was called quality time. And with the quality time, they did not want to address the concept that kids and family members and relationships, they do not need quality time. They need quantity time. It is way better to sit down with a friend in a quantity time situation than it is a quality time. Now, if that friend's taking every day, that is in and of itself a challenge and a problem to deal with. But you need to focus on relationship building. Stop believing the lie of the quality time. I can only spend an hour with you, son, but it's gonna be quality. And he's just like, I want a dad. Okay, and that's kind of that thing. True recreation. Now, true recreation and false recreation is an important distinction, because true recreation is things that you do for fun that help build you up. They recharge your batteries. They move you on, because a refreshed and a recharged person will be better able to accomplish those important and urgent things, or those important non-urgent other things. And so those are kind of those things that you focus on with the quadrant 2. Now, quadrant 3 are important, non-important, and urgent things. So this is where every now and again you got to address some of these things, but you do not want to be dominated by this area. This is interruptions. You're trying to get something done, you get an interruption. If that interruption is not an important interruption, man, table it. Hey, I'm very, very glad that you bought a new purse. I don't care. Okay, it sounds a little rude at times, but if it's an interruption, now if you're doing that as part of relationship building and you say that, now you have a different problem. But some of the mail, some of the reports, some meetings. Now, this is one of the things, though, in our modern business thing where we're pushing towards these business-centric trends, and some consultant read some book, and some consultant read some book, and they're like, we need to have these value proposition meetings. So we used to have to go to these meetings at this one company. We were bought out by a big corporate. Small startup I was working with was bought out by a big corporate, and so they're like almost like over half of the meetings we were required to go to, they were completely unimportant. They were completely not urgent. Of course, they set up the urgency, so they ended up wasting hundreds of man hours on non-important meetings. And, some meetings, I'm a little busy. Of course, there's many proximate pressing matters, meaning, who's running by the water cooler, who's outside the door, what salesman's trying to get into you. And that's one of those things with me is, for me, I have this neat rule of thumb, and that is I do not work with people who cold call me, I'd say 99.9% of the time, okay? We are in a technology age. Get yourself a website. Make sure it has SEO, and make sure I can find you. And then when I'm looking for your service, I will be able to find you. But if you cold call me, you have given me an urgent and not important thing that now I have to deal with in my day, and that makes me feel less of you. So, of course, I'm in some of these networking groups, and sometimes they're good and sometimes they're not. And I had a person for our group. I had her number, and I was looking for a certain model of a phone, and her company sells used phones. So I call her up. I'm like, hey, I'm looking for this model of phone. Can you help me out? And she's like, oh, I'm glad you called. I have a lead for you. It's like, okay, this guy over in this other city, a couple hours away, he doesn't have a website. Like, did he ask? If she says he doesn't have a website and wow, he's really looking for one, I'll give him a call. But if he doesn't have a website in 2017, guess what? It's not important on his list. I'm not going to waste his time, and I'm not going to waste my time, because I don't cold call people. I am busy enough without cold calling people that I don't need to do that. Sorry if that caller was like that for all you OCD folks. I just saw that. I apologize for But, so for that, just because you want to make a sale does not mean I want to answer the phone. So, and that's kind of one of those things. Not that I'm unappreciative of the lead or the tip, but I'm going to ask her when I see her next, hey, did he ask for a website or whatever else? Because, I have this general philosophy. If you're not asking for my help, I'm just going to go, because I have not even come close to the bottom of the resources I know where there are people who are looking for them. And since I've been doing YouTube videos, I'm getting a lot more contacts through my form, than I don't need to cold call people. That's the bottom line. I don't need to cold call people. Is that bad business, not cold calling people? Depends. In my case, no, because I like to work with people who have a lot of my own philosophy, okay? And I have this philosophy. I don't want to be annoyed. And so I'm not going to annoy people. Many popular activities are not important but urgent. And I think one of these things that feels, and this is one of those things where this book was written, I think in the, 90s. Let me see if I can find the copyright on this book. So 1994 is when this edition was 2003, but the original copy of this book was written in 1994. So that sort of predates the internet, definitely predates social media. What has happened in our world? And check out my my tinfoil hat time from last week. What did I call it? I think I called it Crockpot Solutions for Microwave Problems. Is about the sense of urgency that our culture imposes upon us. And what has happened is the not urgent, not important quadrant 4 items. And quadrant 4 is where we need to spend less of our time. We want to spend almost no time in quadrant 4. Okay, so you take your quadrant 4 items, which is trivial busy work, many phone calls, too much television, irrelevant mail, excessive, I think I already said excessive TV, escape activities. These escape activities are those things that lead us into the addictions, whether it be chemical or otherwise. Those are the things we want to avoid. And they're listed as not urgent and not important. But the problem is with the modern trend of social media and the way emails now work and the way texts now work and phone notifications and computer notifications now, the way all these things are working, it's taking all of these not important, not urgent items like who ate what for breakfast on Facebook, and it is pushing them right in front of our face, and that produces an urgent, not important thing that should be a not urgent, not important thing. And that is why it's critically important. If you want to be successful, you turn off every notification that is not a direct phone call or a direct text message. And if you're finding that people are texting you way too much, cut that off too. Turn notifications off for text messages and just check it at certain points in the day. Because that makes sure that a lot of not important, not urgent things do not become not important and urgent things. And that's that thing, because when you spend your time in quadrants 3 and quadrants 4, you're not spending your time in 1 and 2, and 1 and 2 are where your productivity comes into play. And so they walked through a series of other steps and then some questions here. So some of the questions people will have, I think I've really addressed a lot of these. And so I think what we're going to do is we'll go ahead and wrap this one up right here. But anyway, take this concept of this quadrant. Think about, are you addicted to urgency, or do you respond to life, or do you react to life? And that's kind of that difference, responding to life versus reacting to life. So think about those things. And until next time, this has been Tom on Switch to Linux with an outdoor philosophy. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.